The night was thick with humidity, and the streets of Atlanta buzzed faintly under the pale glow of streetlights. Officer Daniel Hayes sat in his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee as he listened to the dispatcher's voice crackle over the radio. A report had come in about a suspicious man near Fort McPherson, a military base on the outskirts of the city. It sounded routine, just another late-night check, but something nagged at the back of Hayes' mind. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and drove toward the location. When he arrived, the area seemed eerily quiet. The figure standing near the fence didn't look like much of a threat. A tall man in civilian clothes, leaning against his car. Hayes approached cautiously, his K-9 partner, Max, by his side. Max was a well-trained German shepherd, known for his sharp instincts and loyalty. But tonight, those same instincts would lead to disaster. "Sir," Hayes called out, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Can I see your ID?" The man turned slowly, his face calm but weary. He held up his hand slightly, showing no signs of aggression. "I'm General Marcus Reed," he said, his deep voice carrying authority. "I just got back from deployment. My family doesn't even know I'm here yet." He reached into his pocket to pull out his military ID. But that small movement set off a chain reaction. Max barked sharply, his body tensing. Hayes tried to calm him, but it was too late. In an instant, the dog lunged forward, breaking free from Hayes' control. Before anyone could react, Max sank his teeth into the general's arm. Reed stumbled backward, shock registering on his face. Hayes froze, his heart pounding. "Max, stop," he shouted, rushing to pull the dog away. But the damage was done. Blood seeped through Reed's sleeve as he collapsed to the ground. Hayes immediately called for backup and medical assistance, but the minutes ticked by agonizingly slow. When paramedics finally arrived, they worked frantically to save the general, but it was futile. Marcus Reed succumbed to his injuries right there on the pavement. News of the incident spread like wildfire. By morning, headlines screamed across every news outlet. Black U.S. Army general killed by police dog. Social media erupted with outrage. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters, chanting slogans and demanding justice. For many, this wasn't just an accident. It was a symptom of deeper issues within law enforcement and society. Officer Hayes, meanwhile, felt like his world was crumbling around him. He replayed the scene in his head over and over, wondering what he could have done differently. His colleagues avoided eye contact, unsure how to comfort him. At home, he stared at the wall, haunted by the image of General Reed lying motionless. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. As the nation grappled with the fallout, one person vowed to uncover the truth. Maya Reed, the general's daughter. She refused to accept the official explanation, convinced there was more to her father's death than met the eye. Little did she know, her quest for answers would unravel secrets far bigger and more personal than she ever imagined. The death of General Marcus Reed sent shockwaves through Atlanta, shaking the city to its core. Within hours, protests erupted in the streets, with thousands demanding justice for the fallen hero, chants of "No more silence" and "Justice for Marcus Reed" echoed through downtown as people held up posters bearing his face. The general had been a beloved figure, a man who had served his country with honor and integrity. His sudden and violent death at the hands of law enforcement felt like a betrayal to many. For Officer Daniel Hayes, life became unbearable almost overnight. Once respected in his community, he now found himself vilified by strangers and neighbors alike. Protesters gathered outside his modest home every evening, holding candlelight vigils and shouting accusations. Some even left threatening notes on his front door. Hayes avoided looking out the window, but he couldn't escape the noise or the weight of their anger. Inside, he sat alone in the dim light of his living room, replaying the events of that fateful night over and over again. Sleep eluded him. When it came, it was haunted by nightmares of Max lunging forward and the sound of General Reed's voice fading into silence. At police headquarters, tensions ran high. Hayes' superiors suspended him without pay, citing protocol while they conducted an internal investigation. But no amount of bureaucracy could shield them from public scrutiny. Calls for accountability grew louder, not just for Hayes, but for the entire system that allowed such tragedies to happen. Civil rights organizations joined the outcry, pointing to systemic issues within law enforcement and the treatment of black individuals during routine stops. National news outlets descended on Atlanta, turning the incident into a symbol of broader societal struggles. Amidst the chaos, one voice stood out: Maya Reed, the late general's daughter. A fiercely intelligent young woman with a determined glint in her eye, Maya refused to let her father's death fade into another statistic. She attended press conferences, spoke passionately about her father's legacy, and vowed to uncover the truth behind what happened that night. Her words resonated deeply with those who had lost faith in the system. "My father gave his life serving this country," she said during one emotional speech. "He deserved better than this." But Maya wasn't content with mere speeches. Behind closed doors, she began digging deeper into her father's final days. Something didn't add up. Why had he been near the military base so late at night? And why did the officer react so aggressively to such a minor situation? As she scoured old emails, phone records, and documents, Maya uncovered small inconsistencies that hinted at a larger story. Each clue pulled her further down a rabbit hole, raising questions she never expected to ask. Meanwhile, the protests continued to grow. Community leaders called for sweeping reforms in policing practices, while others demanded transparency in the investigation. The pressure mounted on local authorities, forcing them to act swiftly or risk losing control of the narrative altogether. For Hayes, the scrutiny felt suffocating. He knew he'd made mistakes, but he also believed there were forces at play beyond his understanding. If only someone would listen. As the city remained divided, Maya's resolve hardened. She sensed that her father's death was more than just a tragic accident. It was a piece of a much bigger puzzle, and she was determined to put it together, no matter where the truth led her. Maya Reed spent her days and nights poring over every document, photo, and scrap of information she could find about her father. Her small apartment became a makeshift investigation hub, with papers taped to the walls and notes scribbled in the margins of files. At first, she focused on understanding the events leading up to his death. But the more she dug, the more questions arose. Questions that didn't have easy answers. One evening, while sorting through an old box of her parents' belongings, Maya stumbled upon something unexpected. A faded letter tucked inside a dusty folder. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the contents stopped her cold. It mentioned her birth and referred to someone named James Carter as her biological father. Confusion washed over her. She had always believed Marcus Reed was her dad, the man who raised her, loved her, and taught her everything she knew. How could this be true? Her hands trembled as she read the letter again, searching for clues. According to the note, written by her mother years ago, Marcus had agreed to raise Maya as his own after promising to keep the truth hidden. It explained that James Carter, an FBI agent at the time, had been involved in protecting her mother during a dangerous operation. Their relationship had been brief, born out of extraordinary circumstances, but it resulted in Maya's conception. Overwhelmed, Maya sank onto the floor, clutching the letter tightly. Everything she thought she knew about her family was suddenly called into question. Determined to confront the truth, Maya tracked down James Carter using public records. After several phone calls and some online research, she discovered he lived just outside Atlanta, retired from the FBI, and living a quiet life. Summoning her courage, she drove to his house one rainy afternoon. When he opened the door, she saw traces of herself in his features, his dark eyes, his strong jawline. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm Maya," she finally said, her voice shaking. I think you're my father." Carter's expression shifted from surprise to sadness. He stepped aside and invited her in, offering her a seat in his modest living room. As they talked, he confirmed what the letter had hinted at. Yes, he was her biological father. No, he hadn't sought involvement in her life out of respect for Marcus and her mother's wishes. And yes, he regretted staying silent all these years. I never wanted to hurt you or your family, Carter said softly, his voice heavy with emotion. But I understand if you hate me for keeping this secret. Maya didn't know how to feel. Anger, confusion, betrayal, they swirled inside her like a storm. Yet there was also curiosity. If Carter was telling the truth, then perhaps he could help her uncover the real reason behind her father's death. Reluctantly, she decided to give him a chance, not because she trusted him completely, but because she needed answers. As their conversation deepened, Carter revealed fragments of his past work, including details about cases involving military corruption and covert operations. Some of the names he mentioned matched those Maya had seen in her father's files. Could there be a connection? Was Marcus Reed targeted because of something he uncovered during his service? The pieces were still scattered, but Maya began to see a pattern emerging, one that pointed to a conspiracy far bigger than she'd imagined. By the end of their meeting, Maya felt a strange mix of emotions. She wasn't ready to call Carter Dad, but she recognized that he might hold the key to unraveling the mystery surrounding her father's death. Together, they agreed to work toward the truth, even if it meant facing painful revelations along the way. Over the next few days, Maya and James Carter began piecing together fragments of the past, each revelation pulling them deeper into a web of secrets. Their initial meetings were awkward, two strangers trying to bridge decades of silence, but their shared goal gave them a sense of purpose. Carter, now retired and living quietly, had spent years distancing himself from the high-stakes world of federal investigations. But as he sat across from Maya, going through old case files and faded photographs, he couldn't ignore the pull of unfinished business. Carter explained that his involvement with Marcus Reed went back nearly 2 decades. At the time, he was an FBI agent tasked with protecting key witnesses in a classified operation tied to national security breaches. One of those witnesses was Maya's mother, who had inadvertently stumbled upon sensitive information while working as a civilian contractor for the military. Her knowledge made her a target, and Carter was assigned to keep her safe. During that period, Carter and Marcus crossed paths frequently. Marcus, then a rising star in the Army, had been brought in to assist with logistics and intelligence coordination. The three of them, Carter, Marcus, and Maya's mother, spent months working closely under intense pressure. Over time, a bond formed between them, one that transcended professional boundaries. Carter admitted that his relationship with Maya's mother developed during this chaotic chapter of their lives, though it ended abruptly when the operation concluded. Marcus stepped in afterward, agreeing to raise Maya as his own to shield her from any lingering danger. As Carter recounted these details, Maya listened intently, her emotions oscillating between disbelief and determination. She wanted to be angry at both men for keeping such a monumental secret, but she also understood why they'd done it. "You thought you were protecting me," she said finally, her voice tinged with frustration. "But look where that got us. My dad is dead, and I'm left chasing shadows." Carter nodded solemnly. "I know I can't undo the past, Maya. But if we work together, maybe we can figure out what really happened to Marcus. Maybe we can make sure his death wasn't in vain." Their investigation took them to unexpected places. Carter used his old contacts within law enforcement and government agencies to dig up leads, while Maya scoured her father's belongings for anything overlooked. They discovered encrypted emails on Marcus's laptop, sent just weeks before his death. The messages hinted at a brewing scandal involving rogue elements within the military and corrupt officials. It seemed Marcus had been gathering evidence, possibly intending to expose the wrongdoing. One name kept appearing in the correspondence: Colonel Evelyn Price, a high-ranking officer known for her ruthless ambition. According to the emails, she had ties to illegal arms deals and was allegedly silencing anyone who threatened to expose her activities. Maya's stomach churned as she realized her father might have been one of those threats. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. Strange cars started tailing Maya on her way home, and anonymous calls plagued Carter's phone line. Someone didn't want them digging further. Despite the risks, neither of them backed down. For Carter, it was a chance to redeem himself, to prove he could still fight for justice after years of retreat. For Maya, it was personal. Every clue brought her closer to understanding not only her father's death, but also the fractured pieces of her own identity. By the end of another long day, sitting side by side at Carter's dining table surrounded by papers and coffee cups, Maya felt a flicker of hope. She still didn't fully trust Carter, and the weight of everything she'd learned pressed heavily on her chest. But for the first time since her father's death, she felt like she wasn't alone. Together, they were unraveling a conspiracy that stretched far beyond Atlanta, and far beyond anything either of them could have imagined. As Maya and Carter delved deeper into the investigation, their findings painted a chilling picture. The encrypted emails on Marcus Reed's laptop revealed not just Colonel Evelyn Price's involvement in illegal activities, but also her connections to powerful figures both inside and outside the military. It became clear that Price wasn't acting alone. She was part of a larger network designed to protect corrupt operations at any cost. What started as a quest for personal closure had transformed into something much bigger, exposing the conspiracy that threatened national security. One evening, while reviewing the files, Carter noticed a pattern in the locations mentioned in Marcus's communications. Several messages referenced an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, a place once used for storing classified equipment. "This has to be where they're keeping the evidence," Carter said, pointing to a map spread across the table. His voice carried a mix of urgency and caution. "If we can get our hands on those documents or recordings, we might have enough to bring them all down." Maya hesitated. Breaking into a potentially guarded location sounded reckless, even suicidal. But she knew they were running out of options. Every lead they followed seemed to put them in greater danger, and time was not on their side. Whoever was watching them wouldn't let them dig forever. After a long pause, she nodded firmly. "We need proof if we're going to stop them," she said. "Let's do it." The next night, armed with flashlights, gloves, and nerves of steel, Maya and Carter approached the warehouse under the cover of darkness. The building loomed ahead, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring back at them. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, rusted and sagging in places. They slipped through a gap near the rear, careful to avoid detection. Inside, the air smelled of damp concrete and decay. Shadows danced along the walls as their flashlight beams cut through the gloom. They moved quickly, searching for anything that resembled a storage area. Just as frustration began to set in, they stumbled upon a locked office door. Carter pulled out a small toolkit he brought along and worked quietly to pick the lock. When the door creaked open, they found exactly what they were looking for: stacks of folders, external hard drives, and even audio recordings labeled with dates and names. Among them was a file marked Operation Iron Veil, the same code name Marcus had referenced in his emails. Before they could celebrate, however, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Someone else was in the warehouse. Panic surged through Maya, but Carter grabbed her arm, urging her to stay calm. "Grab what you can and follow me," he whispered urgently. They stuffed as many documents and devices into their bags as possible before slipping out through a side exit. Back in Carter's car, adrenaline coursed through their veins as they sped away from the scene. Neither spoke until they reached a safe location miles away. Once there, they pored over the materials they'd retrieved, piecing together damning evidence against Colonel Price and her associates. Conversations recorded without consent, financial transactions linking officials to illegal deals. It was all there, undeniable and explosive. But as they celebrated this breakthrough, reality hit hard. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. Their actions had put targets on their backs. Whoever was behind Operation Iron Veil wouldn't hesitate to silence them permanently. Yet, despite the looming threat, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since her father's death, she believed they were close to uncovering the truth, and bringing those responsible to account. With the evidence from the warehouse now in their possession, Maya and Carter knew they couldn't handle this alone. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could help them navigate the treacherous waters of law enforcement without tipping off the conspirators. That's when Maya made a bold decision. She reached out to Officer Daniel Hayes. Reaching out to Hayes wasn't easy for Maya. Every time she thought of him, she saw her father lying lifeless on the ground. But as much as she hated to admit it, Hayes had been present during that night, and he might know more than he realized. Plus, his position as a suspended officer put him in a unique situation. He had nothing left to lose. Hayes was hesitant at first. When Maya showed up at his doorstep unannounced, he looked like a man expecting another round of judgment. But when she explained what she and Carter had uncovered, the illegal operations, Colonel Price's involvement, and the danger they were all in, his expression shifted. For the first time since the incident, Hayes felt like he had a chance to make things right. "I don't care about clearing my name anymore," Hayes admitted after a long silence. "But if I can help bring down whoever's behind this, then maybe I can live with myself again." Working together wasn't easy. Trust didn't come naturally between them, especially given their history. Maya often found herself biting back harsh words whenever Hayes spoke, while Hayes struggled to meet her gaze without feeling overwhelming guilt. Yet, despite their differences, they began to form an uneasy alliance. Hayes provided insider knowledge about police procedures and potential allies within the department who might be willing to listen. Meanwhile, Maya and Carter focused on organizing the evidence into a coherent case they could present to the authorities, or leak to the media if necessary. As they pieced everything together, tensions flared. One evening, while reviewing recordings from the warehouse, Maya snapped at Hayes over a minor disagreement. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said sharply. "This isn't just some mistake, it's a pattern. People like you enforce systems that hurt people like me." Hayes looked down, shame written across his face. "I'm not excusing what happened," he replied quietly. "But I'm trying, Maya. Isn't that worth something?" Carter intervened before the argument escalated further, reminding them both why they were there. "We're running out of time," he said firmly. "If we don't stick together, none of us will make it out of this alive." Their collaboration paid off when Hayes identified a former colleague, a detective named Lisa Monroe, who had recently expressed doubts about corruption within the force. Though initially skeptical, Monroe agreed to review the evidence after meeting with Maya and Carter. Her reaction confirmed their worst fears. The conspiracy reached far higher than anyone anticipated. But just as hope began to flicker, disaster struck. Late one night, as they prepared to hand over the evidence to Monroe, their safe house was raided by masked intruders. Gunfire erupted, shattering windows and sending debris flying. Hayes sprang into action, using his training to shield Maya and Carter from harm. In the chaos, he sustained a gunshot wound to his leg, but managed to hold off the attackers long enough for the others to escape. Bleeding and exhausted, Hayes insisted they leave him behind, so they could get the evidence to safety. "Go," he shouted as reinforcements closed in. "Finish this, for Marcus." Maya hesitated, torn between gratitude and anger. For the first time, she saw Hayes not as the man who killed her father, but as someone willing to sacrifice everything to set things right. As she and Carter fled into the night, clutching the evidence tightly, Maya realized their fight was no longer just about justice. It was about redemption for everyone involved. The raid on their safe house left Maya and Carter shaken but more determined than ever. With Hayes's fate uncertain and their enemies closing in, they knew they had to act quickly. The evidence they carried was their only weapon against the powerful network pulling the strings, and losing it meant losing everything. They decided to take the fight directly to the heart of the conspiracy, Colonel Evelyn Price. Using Carter's old FBI contacts, they tracked Price to a secluded estate outside Atlanta, where she was hosting a private meeting with her co-conspirators. It was a risky move, but they couldn't afford to wait. Armed with copies of the incriminating documents and recordings, Maya and Carter devised a plan to confront Price and expose her crimes once and for all. Under the cover of darkness, they approached the estate, slipping through dense woods to avoid detection. The property was heavily guarded, with armed men patrolling the perimeter. Maya's heart pounded as she crouched behind a tree, clutching the flash drive containing the evidence. "If we don't get this right," she whispered to Carter, "we're dead." Carter nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure we do." They waited until the guards changed shifts before making their move. Using distractions, like throwing rocks to create noise, they managed to slip past the first layer of security. Inside the mansion, voices echoed from a large conference room. Through a crack in the door, Maya and Carter saw Price seated at the head of a long table, surrounded by high-ranking officials and military personnel. Their expressions were cold and calculating, their discussion focused on covering up recent leaks. Mustering every ounce of courage, Maya burst into the room, holding up the flash drive like a shield. "It's over," she shouted, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have everything. Recordings, documents, names. If anything happens to us, the truth goes public." The room fell silent. Price's eyes narrowed as she studied Maya, her composure unshaken. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she sneered, rising slowly from her seat. "But you underestimate who you're dealing with." Before anyone could react, chaos erupted. Guards rushed into the room, but Carter sprang into action, using his years of FBI training to disarm one of them. Maya scrambled to protect the flash drive, knowing it was their lifeline. Shots rang out, echoing through the mansion as both sides exchanged fire. Amid the confusion, Maya spotted an open laptop on the table and inserted the flash drive, initiating an automatic upload to a secure online server. Price lunged toward her, snarling with fury. "You little fool," she spat, grabbing Maya by the arm. But Maya fought back, channeling every ounce of anger and grief she'd felt since her father's death. With a fierce shove, she sent Price stumbling backward, giving Carter enough time to pull Maya away. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, backup arrived, in the form of Detective Lisa Monroe, and a team of officers loyal to her. Monroe had pieced together their location after receiving a cryptic message from Hayes before he was captured. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Price and her accomplices surrendered, their faces masks of disbelief and rage. As the dust settled, Maya collapsed onto the floor, clutching the flash drive tightly. She looked at Carter, who stood beside her, bloodied but alive. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. The evidence was safe, and justice was within reach, but the cost had been immense. Hayes' sacrifice weighed heavily on her mind, as did the lives torn apart by the conspiracy. Yet, despite the scars, Maya felt a flicker of hope. The truth was finally coming to light. The aftermath of the confrontation at Price's estate sent shockwaves through Atlanta and beyond. The evidence Maya, Carter, and Hayes had risked everything to uncover was released to the public in a carefully orchestrated media blitz led by Detective Lisa Monroe. News outlets exploded with headlines detailing the corruption within the military and law enforcement, naming names and exposing decades of illegal activities. High-profile arrests followed, including Colonel Evelyn Price, who was charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and involvement in illegal arms deals. Other officials implicated in the scandal faced similar charges, sending a clear message that no one was above accountability. For Maya Reed, the victory was bittersweet. Justice for her father had been served, but it came at a steep price. Hayes' fate remained uncertain. He had been taken into custody after the safe house raid and was now recovering in a hospital under police protection. Though initially hailed as a hero for his role in helping expose the conspiracy, Hayes still faced legal consequences for his actions during the night Marcus Reed died. Maya visited him once before leaving town, their meeting tense yet meaningful. "You didn't deserve what happened to you," she told him quietly. "But I'm glad you chose to help when it mattered most." Hayes nodded, too choked up to respond. Carter, meanwhile, began rebuilding his fractured relationship with Maya. Their bond wasn't perfect. Years of silence couldn't be erased overnight, but they both recognized the importance of moving forward together. Carter promised to support Maya however she needed, whether it meant helping her process her grief or simply being there as a father should have been all along. For Maya, this newfound connection offered a sense of closure she hadn't expected. She realized that while her biological father might not have been Marcus Reed, the love and values Marcus instilled in her would always define who she was. As the dust settled, Atlanta began to heal. Protests shifted from cries for vengeance to calls for systemic reform. Community leaders worked alongside activists to implement changes in policing practices, ensuring that tragedies like Marcus Reed's death wouldn't happen again. The city, once divided, found unity in its demand for transparency and accountability. Maya eventually returned to her life, though nothing felt quite the same. She channeled her energy into advocacy work, speaking out against systemic injustices and supporting families affected by similar losses. Her story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, determination and courage could bring about change. Hayes, too, found redemption in unexpected ways. His cooperation with investigators earned him leniency, and he used his second chance to mentor young officers on ethical policing. Though haunted by guilt, he took solace in knowing he played a part in dismantling a corrupt system. In the end, the journey transformed them all. Maya learned to forgive, not just others, but also herself for the anger she'd carried for so long. Carter embraced his role as a father, vowing never to let fear dictate his choices again. And Hayes discovered that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but making amends for the future. Though scars remained, the fight for justice had ignited something powerful, a belief in the possibility of change. As Maya stood at her father's gravesite one final time, clutching a single flower, she whispered softly, "We did it, Dad. Your legacy lives on."